and see what I got there. Awesome. All right. Hi, I am Polly Stamatopoulos. I'm the Senior Director of Programs at Progressive Multiplier. For folks who've been around the Fundraising Friday scene for a while, you might have remembered me doing these presentations in the past, but my colleagues have been running the show, so I sort of feel like I'm a guest host appearance for this conversation. And today we're going to be talking about what do we do after the election, and from a fundraising perspective. But I think we also need to have just sort of like a conversation. So let's make this space as let's have as boisterous and useful a conversation as we can, and let's figure out how we can i- turn lemons into something palatable, I guess. So this is the Progressive Multiplier team. We keep growing very excitedly, and some of the members of the team are here on the call. I'm very proud to say, and we like to show you who we are, so that if you ever see us, you know who to reach out to, or if you have any questions, you know who to reach out to. We're all pretty friendly bunch, as you can tell by our big smiles. Um, so our vision is a sustainable progressive movement with the scale and power to achieve justice, realize democracy, and restore the environment. Our mission: money multiplied, change amplified. We help progressive movement groups achieve sustainability um, and scalability by strengthening their catalytic revenue generation capacities and diversifying their financial capital. Um, we are all about helping the progressive sector learn how to diversify their income streams, and grow their bases and do good work all at the same time. We think it's inextricable. Fundraising is organizing, organizing is fundraising, and that's how we build power in a democracy. So we make grants in three areas: restoring the environment, realizing democracy, and achieving justice. You can learn more about our grant making by going to our website, and I encourage you to check it out. And of course, we wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for the Resilience Initiative, and their longtime partnership with us for Fundraising Fridays. So again, for those of y'all who just joined, please introduce yourself in the chat. We are trying to create community and let folks um, meet and connect with each other. Name, pronouns, organization, role, and just say hi. The session is being recorded, as you probably heard when the recording started, and it's being recorded and placed on a private YouTube channel. So you can't Google it, can't look it up on YouTube. You have to actually use the link. So we created a Bitly, Bitly fundraising dash Friday, so that you can look at all the past years workshops whenever you want to. I can tell you that there are some really fantastic content there for old head fundraisers like me and brand new fundraisers. There's a little bit of something for everyone. So what's available through our partnership with Resilience Initiative? This lovely afternoon, but also we do one-on-one coaching sessions. So if you have an interest in getting some direct strategic support from um, uh, expert seasoned fundraisers, you can sign up by reaching out to Michelle Mengel at the Resilience Initiative for coaching hours. And if there are hours available, she'll hook you up with my colleague Janet, and you'll have some time with me or one of my colleagues to work on whatever fundraising issues that you want support working out. It's a really great resource, and I encourage you to take advantage if you need some support. And again, if you want to revisit any of the past sessions that we've had during the course of Fundraising Friday, check out the YouTube channel at the bit.ly fundraising dash Friday. All right, so what we're here to talk about today. Um, so first, we always, whenever we do any discussion that includes a moment in trends, we it's important for us to sort of like have a moment and talk about what's going on now and also see if we can learn from the past. We are data nerds at Progressive Multiplier. So we always look backwards to figure out what we're going to, how we're going to move forward. And we're going to have a little conversation about that today. We're going to talk about managing in the after of the election cycle. And, like, yes, this is about this election cycle, but it's also about like election cycles in general. We want this presentation to be durable more than just this year. So some of the things that we're going to be talking about, um, hopefully are transferable for any time, but also I think, we'll be talking about the things that are relevant right now. So some of the sort of evergreen content around elections is going to be things about like keeping your data tight, retention and stewardship, and also long-term planning for when you do those big activities where you're building your lists and being out in the community, especially around election season. How do you convert those one-time donors that you've just gotten into long-time donors? So I'd love to hear from you. So I really do enjoy an interactive session. So jump off your mute, raise your hand. Sometimes it can be hard for me to see hand raised, by the way, because it's hard to present and keep an eyeball on all the things. But jump off mute. Let me know, how has this election cycle impacted your fundraising, and what do you think is on the horizon? Um, I'm curious because I've reached out to a bunch of folks to see if we've had any of that 2016 post-election bump, and I'm not hearing it as much as I used to. So I'd love to hear, is anybody getting a post-election bump? Are we just still are we all in our feelings and we're not? Where are y'all at with your how the election cycle has impacted you?
I'll pop off for a minute. Howdy, I am the editor in chief over at Nonprofit Quarterly. So we're both thinking about our own fundraising, but also because we support Black and Brown women, LGBTQIA, social justice, racial justice, climate justice, health justice, economic, all the justice areas. We're getting lots of, and we're capacity builders for leaders, emergent leaders. We've been talking to folks a lot, and people are concerned. I'm just going to say, we're hearing board members who are saying, listen, board members who are fundraisers or grant folks who are saying, listen, this is upending what we were planning to do. Don't count on us for the dollars that we had already promised you, which is throwing people into real disarray because it's budgeting season. We are hearing funders say, we don't know what to do, and we think we should probably do frontline, but we're not very good at being nimble. So like everything is on a pause. And I'm hearing a lot of folks, particularly from the front line, that saw stuff in 2016 and immediately got bumps and are not seeing bumps. So legal folks, immigrant, LGBTQIA, et cetera. So we're hearing lots and lots of concern around, where are the funders? Will they land? Where will they land? And how are we going to resource in the meanwhile? Because we cannot be retroactive. We have to be proactive.
Oh, thanks for that. It's good to get confirmed. Um, but I think that there's strategies that we can have around that. Knowing what the landscape is always going to make navigating it easier. Is anyone, but I do know that there are some groups who are getting a bump. So if some organizations are getting one, or I've heard from one group they got a bump like the first 3 days and then not so much after. Anyone seeing anything like that? Anyone want to share concerns? Anybody feel like something's going to turn around or get worse? Hopefully not.
I'll jump in and say that I'm Katie Williams at Native Americans in Philanthropy. I am grant administrator there. And we've been seeing a lot of proactive outreach from our existing partners, funding partners, just checking in and saying we just want to acknowledge that this is a scary time and we want to have a conversation with you about what next steps are. And that has been heartening. So we understand that there are a lot of new challenges. It's a very scary, uncertain time of upheaval. But at the same time, we're hearing people, I think more so than we did in 2016, saying, okay, we have a sense of what this means, which we really didn't in 2016 in many ways. I think we were much more just completely taken aback in 2016. This time we have more informed thoughts and fears and etc. So it's been really nice to just have funders reach out and say, acknowledging that we're all in a pretty scary space, we are in that space together. We are committed to XYZ, given you know the mission of that particular funder, and many of them are saying either I invite a conversation with you at this time to kind of see what we might be able to do and what we can't do together, and even those who aren't proactively saying we'd like to have a conversation, we then have the opportunity to respond and say, thank you for doing that. We'd like to have a conversation just to touch base and see where we are. So it's heartening in a sense. It's great to have open lines of communication at this time and to think about how to really hit the ground running and be as proactive as possible in this time. And certainly gives us some good motivation to not get out of our feelings. We still need to validate those and be in those and work through those, but to think about how we can leverage this time we're in and just do the best work we can possibly do.
Anybody else like to chime in right now to speak on these questions?
I'll throw something in real quick. My name is Renata and I work on agriculture and climate policy. We're usually an outlier in most of these spaces because, you know, ag's its own beast, as it were. But I just want to throw something in quickly. In some ways, I'm drawing more insight from what happened during the pandemic than what happened in 2016. I just wanted to like put that out there because and I hope it happens again. Our funders were extremely responsive and generous at that time. You know, they waived reporting requirements, they doubled down, they did some multi-year grants because we were all so, you know, destabilized and disoriented, and you know, it had such an impact on staff and so on. So I haven't seen signs yet that's going to be the response from our funders. They're more like Katie was saying. They're curious. They want to hear from us, but I haven't seen like a financial response yet. But it's early days, and I think I'm planning to, you know, be proactive about this and try to put out sort of a briefing, you know, on our perspectives on the lay of the land going forward.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You know, I think that there's definitely like I'm seeing the different responses or hearing different responses from like the funder world than from the individual donors. Like, you know, like in 16 and definitely after Dobbs, individual donors just really stepped up, and sort of the big funders were a little bit slower to catch up. In the pandemic, they were much more proactive because individuals were like, I don't know how long this is going to take. I don't know how long we're going to be shut down. I got to hoard my cash. So there was like a switch. Funders stood up during the pandemic. Individuals stood up in 2016 and post Dobbs. So I think it's very it'll be really interesting. My sort of hot take, and I'll go into it a little bit more as we go through the presentation, is that I think that there's a lot of folks who are just numb. Like we're like so many of us are like, here we go again, but also every day with the slow information about like who is being proposed, it's like, oh no, it's actually worse than we all feared. Or, you know, like uh, maybe folks are still have hope, like, no, something is gonna stop this train or something, you know, like not all of these terrible people are gonna take over the levers of power. And I think that because of that either feeling of numb or like just this bombardment of like info, I sort of feel like that if the rage giving or the surge happens, I think it's going to be a slow drip. I think it's going to start happening like sector by sector, like when, you know, the EPA gets ahead, that, you know, gets someone in charge of it that is just terrible. There's going to be a surge in that area, health, you know, surge in that area. There's education surge in that area. And I definitely think after January 20, if folks haven't already started rage giving, I think after January 20, we're probably going to see a bump. So my thinking is that it's going to be a little bit of a slower push. And then when it hits us, when it's real, and we see the, you know, the whole oath thing and that terrible, moment. Like, I think that's, for all of us that are numb, it'll, if we haven't shaken out of it by then, I think it'll probably shake out. But, on that day, which means that we have to be strategic and we need to start thinking. So unless somebody's else wants to chime in here, I'll start moving along. And you can always interrupt at any time. So if you have something that you want to say later, you can bring it back. So let's talk about the today and let's see what we can learn from past elections. So I want to just sort of like honor that the loss is real, the exhaustion is hella real. And especially as fundraisers, we have to feel these feelings and feel the pressure. This is the fundraising season. This every year, starting probably, depending on when you get when you get your stuff in order, you could already be in year-end high gear, or you could be starting your year-end high gear. But this is when the pressure is really real, and having to deal with these emotions and the pressure and the the threats that are, of what is to come, which then impacts our organizational needs. All of that is really weighing on us. And I really, I just really want you to know that, like, we're all in this together. we're we're all feeling it. You're not alone in these feelings. I can't do anything about your workload, but I can tell you I see you. And just, like, like, experience what you're experiencing, and on some level we got to keep it moving, because we can't, unfortunately, just many of us can't take a time out right now. So navigating all of these emotions is exhausting. And if you haven't seen the post that Progressive Multiplier put out on our social media channels, I encourage you to take a look. But the radical act of caring for each other and for the movement is how we're all going to get through this. And I really do think that, like, in these times of, like, when when shit gets hard, I just have to remember that, like, we are a resilient folk. We have had to face, depending on the movements that you're in, the identities that you exist in, more than likely you've had to face insurmountable obstacles in the past. If not you personally, then your people, then your movement, then our ancestors have had insurmountable obstacles, and it was the resilience that helped us achieve those goals in the past, and it's that resilience that's going to help us get through this right now. And on the fundraising part of the slide, I think that, like, in this moment of feeling numb and helpless, and frustrated and angry, most people just want to do something. They want to feel like they're pushing against the wave that's crashing down against them. And we can think about the work that we do not as just labor and the thing that's like one more thing on our shoulders, but it's a way to help ourselves and our constituents do something that can help push back against the forces that are coming at us. So you're offering opportunities, because fundraisers never just fundraise, right? We educate, we do outreach, we give people lots of calls to action, to connect, to do things, to get involved, or just to feel seen, and to read something maybe positive or hopeful. We can be the salve, and we should be. So what happened in past years? Typically, after in an electoral season, giving from political donors continues to grow. So most folks, there's an assumption that, like, if you're a political, someone who likes to give to candidates and races and ballot measures and stuff like that, after the election day, you're done. you're not going to be giving another penny. But that's actually not true. What we've seen is that those folks continue to give and increasingly give after the election, after election day. So if you have, like if you're a C3 and C4 organization, or if you do a lot of advocacy work, sometimes there's a thought of like, we just hit this group of people really hard. We've been messaging our activists a lot. We're going to take a timeout between November and year end. That's a huge mistake. They're plugged in, and especially now where they feel they want community, they want to connect with people. What giving from non-political donors tends to go down after the election cycle, because they're the ones who are going to be feeling the fatigue, not, so it's a little bit backwards in what the assumptions might be. There is typically an increase in giving to groups that are represented by the losing party of whatever election. So if you're a local organization, it'd be your local elections. When it's national, it's national. And then there's usually a decrease, a slight decrease, not not very much, but a slight decrease for the winning party, because folks tend to think like, oh, they're good, they're covered, we won, they're covered, there's going to be things that happen. And then of course, fundraising money, rage giving, surge giving changes when the results are unexpected, which is what my caveat is at the bottom about after the 2016 election season, we blew these numbers way out of the water. So what happened in 2016? We have now a term that we call rage giving. We used to call it crisis giving. We used to call it surge giving. Well, we still call it surge giving. But then it was more aptly named, I think, rage giving after 2016. Of the organizations, there's not a lot of like longitudinal, like cross wide data that I could find. It's much more anecdotal, but many of the organizations that were publicly sharing how much their fundraising increased, I was seeing like 1,000%, 2,000%, 5,000%. We also saw really huge bumps after the Dobbs decision. So what do we know about rage giving? Clearly, it's usually incited by a moment or an event. They're similar to crisis giving donors, but not exactly. And so crisis giving donors would be like the folks who gave after the recent hurricanes, or when there's a massive fire and there's a relief effort. They're pretty similar to those donors. But they might not be as durable as crisis donors. They are difficult to keep around, but it's really not impossible. It has a lot to do with your ability to engage and relationship build. Rage donors tend to skew heavily female, because most of the studies that have been done on rage donors have been done in the last 10 years, and women have had their rights under attack over the last 10 years. And the most important thing about rage giving is that you need to actually plan for it. And if it happens and you don't have a plan for it, you need to plan in the moment. You need to start figuring out what you're going to do now. So even though I remember talking to a lot of folks after Dobbs and after 2016, and they were like, I'm just so busy dealing with this influx that I can't even think about what I'm going to do next. And I was always like, take an hour. If you can, just take some time to think about what you can do next, because what you do next is going to really greatly impact how many of those donors are going to be sticky or durable, or whatever is the cliche that you like to use. So how do we prepare for rage giving? What are things that we can do now? So all of your organizations who think that you might be a beneficiary of rage, which means that you might be directly under attack, think about things that will entice people immediately. So after Dobbs, people just started to Google reproductive health care in their state. and whatever website came up, they went to that web page. So think of what, like what would you do or what have you done? So when you go to a brand new website of a brand new organization, like, you could be puttering around and, that ubiquitous donate button just sort of disappears in the background if you're not, if you're just sort of reading. You don't want that to happen. You want to make sure that you are inviting people to give right away. I am a fan of if homepage don't pop up. I suggest a delayed pop up, because if as soon as you go to the website and a pop up happens, folks tend to click it off faster from some of the case studies that I've read. But a delayed one, like after either like a certain amount of scroll or a certain amount of time a pop up happens, do a, like put your best call to action, ask for money, not just any other call to action, but ask for money. Make sure you're making your best case for why. Um, Also, make sure your donation page, your donation form or forms are tight. Are they working? Do they have any hiccups? Make your own donation to your organization so that you can see what the user experience is like. And if you have time to fix any bugs, fix those bugs as soon as possible. Make sure you're feeding that social media beast. This is a perfect time end of the year is a perfect time to feed the social media beast anyway, because you want to create surround sound. Social media is going to start to get really busy. But especially when people's emotions are inflamed and we might be in a moment of rage giving, you want to make sure that there is a heavy continual cadence of information about your organization, that you have posts that talk about your impact, your effectiveness, talk about your plans. Make sure it's like you want to credentialize yourself so they can feel safe in supporting you, and also give them something to hope for by talking about what you're going to do in the future. And make sure that you use storytelling. So if you're not good at like using storytelling while giving impact, do them separately. Do an impact, do a did you know, do something about a plan, and then tell an individual story as a separate thing. But make sure you do use storytelling so that you can really hit people's full brain and heart as they bump into your content. You find ways to use automation so you can have a whole big pile of like evergreen content that just sort of like keeps getting posted. So that, the occasional social media user will bump into something that you've posted. And then you literally, like, I think we can't be passive around the rage giving. Like, we should invite it. We should invite people to turn their anger into change. Make sure that you're connecting your solicitations and your social media posts and your calls to action that are non-monetary too, to the fight ahead. If you're an immigration group, connect it to the fear around mass deportations and family separations and what we experienced the first time around, and why it's so important that we fill our coffers now, because waiting for it to start to happen is going to be too late. It's always better to be prepared than reactive. I'm from Baltimore. We like to say, if you stay ready, you ain't ever got to get ready. So this is where you sort of lead in to that sort of thinking. If you wanted to be ready for everything, whatever could come up, what may, what do you need to have in shape? You need to make sure your database is tight. You need to make sure forms are tight. You need to make sure you give people opportunity to sign up for your email list and sign up for and make a donation. And you're putting stuff out on your social media, inviting folks to go to your website. And you have to ask. And I'm always going to tell you to ask for money. But you can ask, many organizations are great at calls to action that don't just include money. So lean into that stuff too. If you need volunteers, ask for volunteers, and give folks, say, like, if you can't volunteer, help us by giving a donation. Like, you don't have to bifurcate your calls to action. It can be like, come to this event, and if you can't come to this event, support the event by giving us money. Come to this protest. You can't come, help us buy the poster board and the markers and the and the bullhorns or whatever. But remember to ask, like, give folks an opportunity to put their anger to work. what and in whatever way folks want to. Does that make sense to folks?
Holly, you got a question in the
Awesome.
chat. From Rose, asks, what are your thoughts on making an ask now when we are also doing a big year-end appeal that will land in people's mailboxes in about 2 weeks?
Really important question. So year-end fundraising to me is something that, like basically starts in July. Like you want to start asking in November anyway, right? And you should be asking on a regular clip. If you said mailboxes and not inboxes, so I'm assuming you're doing direct mail. Direct mail really, what we know about direct mail is about 50% of the people will actually open the envelope. And of those people, about, maybe 25 will do something with that reply device in the letter that you sent. So sending messages by email, by text, on social media, soliciting in multiple ways just gives you a better opportunity to reach people. Also, we live three-dimensional lives, right? And I might get something in the mail, put it in my bag, go to the office, and then, like pull it out of my bag and, go to the website and fill out the donation form there. I might not even use the QR code or the thing that you sent me because, I'm a lady of a certain age. So AARP has been telling me beware of QR codes and only trust these organizations. And all of the media is going to be like, don't get scammed. So I might get your direct mail piece and respond by going to your website directly and clicking the donate button. So you might not even know that my gift was spurred by that mail piece. So you need to sort of treat people as three-dimensional creatures. Also, there's other things that we learned about direct mail in that different age groups. I don't like to really talk about it as generations because it really is about your age group, behave differently with direct mail. Older folks tend to be much more direct mail responsive because they grew up with it. That was the way that they gave. That was like the safe way to give. They were, if I remember folks being like super scared. I've been in fundraising for 33 years. People were super scared to give out credit card numbers by any means. And then when digital fundraising came in, it was like, you want me to put my credit card in this machine? Are you crazy? So you have like, like the 60s, 70s and older who are going to be much more direct mail responsive. My age group, the 50s, 40-year-olds are going to be, we're going to be moved by direct mail, but we might complete the transaction external from direct mail. People in their 30s, 20s and 30s tend to not be as moved by direct mail. But I actually think that the direct mail has a big place in our fundraising tool bag because our inboxes are slammed, our cell phones are getting blasted, but our mailboxes aren't as full. Back in the day, it used to be like this giving season, your mailbox would literally just be busting open with like tons of solicitations. That just doesn't happen anymore because direct mail is expensive. But so I wouldn't worry too much about like any other messaging hurting your direct mail. I think what it does is create that surround sound that I'm talking about. Like they're going to get their mail piece, they're going to see you on social, they might get something by email from you, and it's just going to reinforce if you are careful with your messaging and you sound like the same organization is communicating with you, that it's just going to reinforce the need. So I wouldn't worry about it hurting. I think it will help. Any other questions? All right. So how do we manage in the after? So this is sort of part of the the evergreen, not just this year, but other years too. It's going to be really important to leverage the outcome. You want to, and how you do that is making sure you tell your story and connect your story with with what happened. During, especially if your organization does a lot of civic engagement, you've probably been out there pounding the pavement, knocking on doors, doing a lot of things, and getting a whole lot of new people on your list. This is not a time to go silent. And that's why I said, like, it is a, like, I was underscoring that whole, like, political donors do give more. Um, the, this is a time to make sure that you don't, like, you've been talking to these folks lots and lots and lots and lots, and don't just cut off communication. You spent time building these relationships for one reason, keep the relationship building going. So if you haven't thanked folks for signing up for your list, or making a donation, or make sure you do that. And by the way, a receipt for a donation is not a thank you. A receipt is not a thank you. A thank you is a thank you. So I like to put it I like to put it this way. When I go to the 7-Eleven and buy my Slurpee, occasionally, I'm going to get a receipt for that transaction. But but what makes, that's not a thank you. That's transactional. That's just part of the course of doing business. But when I'm walking out the door and they're like, "Thanks, Polly. See you next time," that's my thank you. So make sure that you do not confuse your transactional obligation, the receipt, with actually relationship building, heartfelt thank you that has information connected to it about what you do, what you're going to do with their cash, what the importance of their support, and whatever else that you need to say at the moment. The other thing that you want to make sure you do in the making sure that you've welcomed and thanked the folks that you've been engaging for the last couple of months, is make sure that you connect the impact of the election with your mission. So let's say you had some really good results. You had ballot measures that were a big win, and it's going to be really, that are directly tied to your mission. Do that. Talk about that, and about how you got to keep your foot on the gas so you can keep doing more of that. If it's going the other way, you need to explain why this is such a difficult, dangerous time, and why your investment now, even before the bad stuff hits the fan, why it's so important to get support now, because we need to be ready, so we ain't got to ever get ready. Also, by communicating with folks post the election cycle, especially in a negative, with negative results, you're letting them know that they're not alone, that they're in community with you, and that they can, that you are with them. I don't know how many of you all were encouraged actually by the number of email. I got so many emails from organizations that I've connected to that were like, this was hard, but we're in this together. We're gonna cry tonight and we're gonna fight tomorrow type of messages. And like, I was sad, upset, angry, and all the feelings. And the more those messages I got, the more I was like, yeah, we are gonna fight. We're gonna keep fighting. I can dust myself off, damn it. We have been here before. So don't underestimate the power of even those types of messages too. And make sure you give a vision of the future. It's not, it's not just, oh my gosh, this is so terrible, but this is what, if we can do these things, if we can fight for these things, if we're going to do this plan, then we actually, we are the light at the end of the tunnel. We don't have to wait for someone else. Also, it's important, so like it's important to sort of think about, how do things change. So I think one of the navel gazing things that's been happening a lot with movement groups that I've been talking to is like, they put out such a tremendous ground game, and everyone's sort of like, was that the strategy? Should we be rethinking strategy? And definitely we should all, we're always iterating as fundraisers, as organizers, as activists. We're always trying to figure out, like, what is the best way to reach people in a meaningful and impactful way. And I think that we should always be doing that. And I think that like it's important to have those conversations and be transparent about like, we really need to think about our strategies and we want to hear from you, ask for advice, get their, like create opportunities for people to connect. So talking about your plans, talking about how the fight might change, like like especially if your issue area is going to be greatly impacted by the promises of the current administration, your fight is going to change because this is like a drastic departure from one administration to the other. So I would imagine that there's going to be some serious turning on heels about strategy. Talk about that. And then, as best as you can, demonstrate how their support will make a difference. So there was this really great thing that the American Civil Liberties Union did that if you can go find it, I know this is not readable, but this is what it looked like. It was a full page ad in the Washington Times sorry, in the New York Times. And what was really great about it was it was sort of a somebody had said it was like a perfect example of solid fundraising and it didn't even make an ask, and I couldn't agree more. So one, they wasted no time in putting out a message, and it was like basically like um we're not moving to Canada, or we're here and we're not going anywhere and we're going to fight you. And what they did was they led with their values. They talked about like, these are the people that we're going to defend. You're going to go after these people. These are our people. So you're picking on us. They reminded us of their track record. So their next paragraph was about like, we beat you all of these times in court and we're going to, and that's not going to stop. They evoked the power of their base. So they were like, we've got millions of members and supporters around the country. So it's not just, it's not just us, but we are legion essentially. Um, and they talked about their future plans. It was sort of like this is like a fundraising letter 101 like breakdown. So if you could find it so you can read the whole thing, I think it would be useful. They said that what they were going to do next, which was, we're going to keep the heat on. We're going to sue you at every chance we get. They used really good writing techniques. Like each one of these paragraphs are almost all of them are one sentence paragraphs. And the ones that are not one sentence paragraphs, it's like a one sentence followed by a short declarative sentences. I love short declarative sentences in my fundraising pieces or in my information pieces. So they used bold, confident language in the face of saying, we know that this is going to be a fight. And in my opinion, they left no crumbs. So the other thing that's really important is to make sure that um that you speak from a place of authenticity, that um you don't go under the covers and hide. You don't like I indulged, for a day yeah, my desire to like just go up into my workshop and like do some fun woodworking and make beautiful wood art and never show my face in activist spaces again. And then I was like, no, okay, that was a nice little momentary getaway, but we got to put the shoulder to the wheel again. Organizationally, you should be thinking like, that's one thing about like, for your personal constitution, take the time that you need and make sure you're taking care of yourself, but organizationally, don't disappear. Your organization can't take a timeout. So this is where you really need to lean on teamwork if folks are struggling. So pre-election, you might have had a really high message cadence. Post-election, that cadence is going to change, but it cannot go away. So you can't just stop sending messages. The the type of message and tone that you used pre-election, there should be a through line to the messaging that you use post-election. Now, different types of urgency probably are going to be at play, but just make sure it doesn't sound like, like too like very different voice-wise. Being consistent, accurate, and clear really does build trust. Um, Speaking authentically also presents you as a honest broker, to especially to new donors, but also is comforting to your longtime donors, because they, like amid all this tumult and change, they want to feel like you are steady state, that they can rely on you. Um, Also pay attention to the messaging environment around you, and see like, so in your ecosystem, in your area, like, is there messaging that's happening by others in your ecosystem that is impacting results and your statistics? Like, are folks drawn more to these other messages than yours? Is there something that you can learn from that and from what you're seeing in the ecosystem? So it's iteration is always good. I mean, you don't want to iterate for iteration's sake, but like, if you have something to learn from other people's messages, take those learnings, is basically what that means. But just make sure you still are doing it using your voice and your authenticity. And whenever possible, so this is sort of in that same vein, when you see that there is something that's moving people to action in your in your wheelhouse, make sure that you connect to that, so that, or at least point to, like, yeah, us too. And directly connect where people's passions are driving them, and let them know that, yeah, you're in that space too. Any questions about that section? Have folks, just in the last week, are folks increasing, decreasing messaging? Are you seeing any changes in the way that people are responding to your messaging? Feel free to hop off mute, or I can just keep it going. The other important thing that we really need to do is, like, this is not a time to sleep on our CRMs, on our data. Any of that list hygiene stuff that we need to do, we can't take a break on that. We've got to stay up on that. So my question here is, if you were active pre-election, did your list grow during the run-up to the election? And what are you doing to hold on to all those new friends? Just want to hear if anybody want to speak up on that. I'm hella comfortable being awkward here with silence. If you did a lot of list building during the election season, I do think it's really important to make sure that you have a gateway or an opportunity to build those relationships, um, thoughtfully and stepwise and methodically. And I'll get into that. But it's also important to think about how you use your data.
Holly,
Yep.
really quickly, Stanley has a question. They ask, are there rules off the top of your head around whether you can use voter contact information? Let's say folks who responded super supportive of our ask to them and inviting them to our email list.
If they have interacted with you directly, I believe they are fair game. So if you've interacted with them directly, I believe that is considered consent to communicate. If there's somebody who is, like, super on top of that, because the hamster in my brain that runs the wheel, it's taking a nap right now. Someone has got more brain power and knows the answer better or wants to chime in, I'd love to hear. I'm sure they're experts in the room. Feel free to also just type it in the chat You don't, you don't have to come off mute if that's not just the way how you like to go. So one of the things that I see in a lot of movement-based organizations is they create this weird bifurcation of their lists. They have their activists or advocates or leaders or some type of way of calling one set of people on their list, and then they have their fundraising list, which includes donors, but also sometimes includes non-donors and other folks. And for some reason, we treat these lists very differently. We communicate with them differently. We don't solicit everybody. It is really, really frustrating to as someone who has helped lots of organizations every time I see it, because the desire is always to not lose supporters. But I can tell you, by behaving in this way, you're losing supporters. And also you're removing their agency. You're being paternalistic and making decisions about what information those people should get. You're saying these folks, they don't have money. We don't need their money. We don't, and on the other side, your donors, we don't want them to show up to actions. We don't need them to sign petitions. We don't need to have them show up at the legislature. Like, we're making decisions for people who should have their own agency. So it's our jobs to ask, it's their jobs to decide. And if we're not asking, we're not doing our jobs. And we're being paternalistic assholes, in my opinion. So make sure, if you've like, I am a huge fan, and I'm going to be talking about segmentation and tagging and doing things with your data so that you can target better. That is very different than being like, this huge crop of people I'm never soliciting because reasons. And also, just as an FYI, if you're trying to raise money off of your database, soliciting people who are already on your list is going to be significantly cheaper than trying to do acquisition. Significantly cheaper. They already know you. They've already been in contact with you. They've already been in the realm of your of your messaging. Not soliciting them is silly at that point. And remember when I told you that like advocates and political people tend to give more? This would be one of those times, those examples of like how we're shooting ourselves in the foot if we're bifurcating our lists in this way. We've built relationships with these people, and by not soliciting everyone on our list, we're creating an obstacle that's just not necessary. So open the gates, ask all your constituents. One of the studies that I saw that just blew my mind, it says that people who participate in advocacy are as much as 7 times more likely to make a donation than people who don't. So I've literally watched dozens of organizations bifurcate their lists and be like, this group of people we don't solicit, but I'm going to spend $5,000 on an acquisition campaign to build my donor list. It might seem rational because we think, we think in terms of like what do we need from folks, right? Our activists, we need them to do these things, and our donors, we need them to do these things, but we don't think that these are the same. These could possibly be the same people. The people that we serve, our volunteers, our advocates, our leaders, our activists can be all of those things as well as donors. So if you have those, arbitrary walls, take them down. Make sure that you're welcoming all your constituents. When someone signs up to your email list, when someone joins your list, when they join by making a donation, make sure that you have a welcome series. Organizations that have a welcome series see conversion rates increase by 30%. the other, I've sort of been saying this already, but like the advocates who care about creating change are gonna get it. If they care about like all of your C4 activities, for example, they're probably going to care about your C3 activities. If they care about one program area, they're probably going to care about the other program areas. Don't be afraid to like show them who you are and have a full relationship with them. And having a full relationship with your constituents means that it's full. It means that you show them where you're at financially. You have conversations about money. You need them to sign petitions, you need them on the streets, you need them to do the things, you need their financial support so that you can continue to do the things. And learn from your data, especially now. Go back and look at your messages. See what worked and what didn't. Pull back, look at several results at a time. What were the things that people were responding to most? What actions were they taking most? What language were they responding to most? Don't look at much. The open rates are sort of a misleading thing to look at. Don't worry yourself with open rates, but really look at clicks. Where are people clicking in the emails that you're sending? If you have like a surge moment, rage moment, and you have a whole bunch of people giving, how do they show up? Is it because they think that your mission is connected to the thing that they are raging about? Or is it something else? Connect them to your mission as quickly as possible. And while you're looking at all this stuff, find ways to tag people and say, like I said, like take down the walls that say don't solicit everyone or don't ask everyone to do activist stuff. But segmentation doesn't mean put those walls back up. It just means put markers on your list so that you can do targeting. If you see a group of people who are always responding to these types of messages, flag that and say these folks all like these types of messages. So I'm going to lean in when I communicate with that type of a message. I'm going to make sure that they're on that list. You don't always have to send every message to everyone. Targeting is actually, going to be better for your email deliverability. But you can't target until you start to actually put more information in your CRM that allows you to track that info about your constituents. So again, like if the by leaning into these old, ways of thinking of having these like different lists and not looking at people as whole people, we just really hurt ourselves. So again, people who respond to advocacy messages are significantly more likely to become donors. Advocacy related messages have higher response rates than direct fundraising appeals. So you can also try hybrid. You can do hybrid messages that are advocacy forward, maybe don't cross that, don't cross that lobbying line, but also have if you want to support this fight, give here message too. Because we know that solicitations that connect to advocacy messages do better. So the converse can also be true. And then about the multi-entity issue, we know that like if you have a C3 and a C4 with different functions and different, you have that firewall between them on some level because of the types of activities you're doing. You can still help each other. Don't, like I said, acquisition can be really expensive. You don't have to waste your resources. You can create joint list sharing agreements. Your C3 can rent its list or share its list with their C4 and vice versa. The like you can have if you have two separate websites, you can have them point to each other. Just make sure that you are following. So the rules around lobbying and C3 and C4 are at the federal level, but they also have state level implications. So just make sure that you're getting some legal advice around how you can crosstalk with your with your various entities. And I always suggest whatever the attorney says, push back and see if you can get the to move the envelope forward. My experience has always been the first bit of advice I get is the most conservative, and if I push back, they're like, "Well, yeah, Polly, actually, you do have a little bit more room, but the line is the line. All right, just tell me where the line is. I'll stay clear of the line, but I don't need to be, 10,000 yards from it." Um, but like if you do have two entities, make sure that or multiple entities, that your entities are helping each other grow. And make sure that you're doing it in the appropriate way with the sharing agreements and all the and keeping and making sure that everyone understands what the rules are. That makes sense. Are folks tired of me saying, does that make sense? All right, so now when we know we've got all these people, we've added to our database through the selection cycle. We've got all these people showing up to our website because they're mad as hell and they're not going to take it anymore. That's for all the old people in the in the workshop today. What do we do? How do we hold on to these folks? So we're going to go into that, but first I want to hear about what your concerns are about holding on to folks. Have any of y'all, did any of you see the bumps in 16 or after Dobbs and then really struggle to hold on to those folks? I just love to hear what concerns are, what your experiences were, and if you've got a success story, what worked for you. Anyone? I can't see if you got hands up, so just come off mute and start talking.
Hi, I'm Devin. I'm from Sprout in the Louisiana Food Policy Action Council. The most of, I mean, our base and most of the folks that we work with and talk to are farmers. And so one of the things that we saw, not necessarily in 2016, but pandemic wise, was that like the material conditions of people's lives got significantly harder. And in order to just kind of maintain, a lot of folks, like put their head in the dirt even more. And I'm not saying like in a dumb way, but they like literally had to hustle harder in order to make ends meet. And so I think that or for us, there's like kind of a contrast between who we serve and who we tend to get donations from that is making it a little bit difficult. And trying to think about like how to marry those is one thing that I'm thinking about with this question and generally.
Yeah, I think it is a constant conversation that I have about like how, the part of our list that is, aside from the activists that I hear the most like concern about, are the people that we serve part of the list. I have to say that my answer is always the same. And I've worked, like I said, I've been in fundraising for 33 years. I have done all kinds of fundraising with all kinds of constituent groups and often not folks with money. I believe in giving people the agency to say yes and giving people the agency to say no. And that's where the paternalism sort of sticks in the back of my head. And let me just give you a quick anecdote. I worked for a mental health service organization where we worked with people with really severe and persistent mental illness. All the people that we worked with were getting SSI or SSDI, so severely limited incomes. Our part of our ethos was that people that we serve were on our board of directors. So right next to a high up official at American Airlines, we had folks who were on SSI. We also had a give-get policy on our board. And I remember my very first board meeting with that organization. I was sitting next to one of our members who was on our board, and I did the the pitch to the board, like we have a give get policy, and if anyone wants to make their contribution right now. And one of the members sort of turned around and handed me a check, and I just was sort of like dumb, like a little surprised. And when I saw the amount, I realized, and he said, yeah, I give this every month just to let you know. And when I looked at the amount, I realized that that made him a major donor. Now, this is a person on a severely fixed income. We even said the ask could be, like you can give $1, you can give 50 cents, you can give $1,000, you can give whatever you can, because we certainly didn't want that, but just, the general counsel of American Airlines to give 50 cents, but we wanted to give folks that out comfortable to give what they could. But he was giving, so he made the personal decision. He was like, I know how to budget, and I worked it in my budget, and this is what I'm giving every month. And he taught me to stop making assumptions about what people can and cannot give. People will give what they want when they want. And we're not like, I'm assuming that you're an ethical fundraiser, that you're not going to use manipulation tactics. You're not going to be overbearing or bullying in the way that you do solicitations. You're inviting them to give, and they will give if they want, and they won't if they can't, or they don't want to. And I learned so much in that in my early career about the dignity of asking everyone and the agency to afford everyone the opportunity to say yes or no. So I really do encourage you to think in that way, and you'll probably get lots of no's from people. But there's also, what we know is that the people who give the most in this country are the people who have the least, because they know what it's like. Do anybody else have concerns or examples of what, or concerns about holding on to donors, or examples of what happened in past elections? We'll just keep it going. Thanks for speaking up. So we have to steward our relationships. So it means that we need to make sure that we're communicating. Receipt is not a thank you. Make sure we're thanking our donors. That we have communications that are going out with a regular clip that talk about the impact that we're having, what we're doing, what's going on in your organization. You need to just keep the information going, and whenever possible, use automation to your benefit. One of the things that I like to do is doing, most of my emails will have some type of a drip component, so that maybe I'll send out a message, and it might not even be a solicitation. Maybe it's just a regular info email. And then 3 days after that email goes out, all of the non-clicks, or maybe the non-opens, will get it again. Just the exact same email. And I do that because, like, if open rates were accurate, which we know that they're not, but they are what, they at least are a measure that we can look at. If open rates were accurate, we'd probably be looking at maybe 30% of the people actually open the email. So by doing an automation like a drip that puts it back out there 3 days later to the people who didn't open it or click, it gives just another opportunity to get those folks to see the message. So using automation to get more people to engage with your content is just going to be really important. And then you also have to find other ways to try to connect more meaningfully. Could you have a quarterly Zoom call where you invite donors in to talk, where you have like different program directors, for example, talk about what they're working on and what's going on, or how the work is being impacted, give folks like the behind the curtains view. There's lots of things that you can do to try to encourage relationship building. And but really is important to make sure that you keep the communications up. And that you don't wait too long. Like, like one email a month is not going to be enough. Just, like several a month is going to probably be better. So that's where automation comes in, where you can push messages more than once to try to get under people's eyeballs, under it in people's view. Because we want to guard against attrition. I don't want you to be afraid of unsubscribes, by the way. If somebody is telling me that they don't want my content, I'm happy about it, because most of our CRMs you have to pay by the pound. So if somebody's telling me that they don't want to be on my list, great, I don't want to pay for you anyway. Right? So attrition is inevitable. So they, maybe join the list, and then, in a moment and realize this isn't actually for me. Maybe they lost interest, or they're not with us anymore. So attrition happens. So list hygiene is going to be really important. That's something you have to keep up with it. But the attrition that is preventable are the things that I would suggest that you focus on. And that's like making sure that people are welcomed and thanked, that you have opportunities for meaningful engagement, like things that require a call and response, that you're not just speaking out into the wind and like all of your messages is just like shooting outward. Give folks opportunities to comment back. I love the one question survey, with a subject line of like, what is the one thing that we need to know about blank? And they open the email and you've got a one question survey for them to fill out. Like find ways for people to interact with you too, so that the relationship is reciprocal. And find ways to get their input. So when it comes to like keeping people on your list, focus on the things that you can do to make the relationship stronger. So, what you need to know is that donor retention rates have just been really terrible. And I think they've been really terrible because we've done a really terrible job of relationship building. We do too much of blasting out and not enough of interactive communication. When I first started fundraising, the first time donors renewed at 50%. Now retention rates for all donors is well below that. So, we're doing stuff different, and we got to figure out what we're not doing right. So I would definitely take a look. And if you've got higher retention rates than what the national average is, awesome. You are doing something right, but don't let it be by accident. Figure out what you're doing right and lean in. So first time donors are hard to keep now. They're like 20%, but we know if you do a welcome series and you ask for that second gift at the end of that series, you're more, and they give, they're more likely to stick around. So part of retaining people is keeping the relationship reciprocal, giving them an opportunity to do something. The more gifts that you get from a donor, the more likely they're going to stick around, which is why monthly giving rocks. And also the larger the gift, the more likely they're going to stick around too. So having a strategy where you're trying to get folks to become monthly donors or increase their giving actually helps with the longevity, because people don't invest in things they don't care about. And they typically don't give you more money unless you ask for more money. So the more somebody invests in you, the more likely they're going to stick around. I'm not going to give an organization $250 and then be like, yeah, that was a win. That that just typically does not happen with me. And I don't really think I'm special. So just like organizing, the key to retention is relationship building. All of that work, all those relationship building skills that you have as organizers, you got to use them in this space. You got to thank them. You got to communicate. You have to share your impact. You have to invite them to engage. You got to talk to them in all the different ways, 360 full relationships, get their feedback, and also solicit them. I sort of refer to this as like, rather than investing in acquisition, love the one you're with. Love the folks that showed up and are already here, and build those relationships. Now, I'm not saying don't do acquisition. We've got to always fight against that attrition that happens. But just don't do it at the expense of the folks who are already on your list. And this is that stay ready with content, I sort of feel like the whole story behind what do we do at post-election is sort of the stay ready mentality. We got to make sure that we are ready for whatever comes at us. Think about, are you already implementing storytelling? Do you have plans? Do you have a communication calendar and a cadence set up for not only between now and year end, but year end and beyond? Um, is your content going across all your channels? Meaning, if you're sending out an email with a certain message, is that message also being relayed on your social media channels? Are you doing it in text? Are you using interesting other ways to communicate, like direct to voicemail? Can you share your messaging in other ways to make sure that you're creating a really good surround sound and continual information sharing? So, and making sure that you are um, create an evergreen file of content that you can constantly use. So you don't always have the burden of having to have that creative moment of like, all right, I got to do a social media post. No, you've got a big old pile of evergreen content that if you know that you want to do a good cadence on your social media of a good clip, like twice a day or once a day or 3 times a week or whatever is the cadence that you can do religiously without fail, make that your cadence, but also make it easier on you. So if you've got this whole bunch of evergreen content, are there tools that you can use where you can set it and forget it, where you're basically sort of like creating like a carousel, like every 3 days, like something gets pulled and put up, whether did something new or not. So try to find ways to use automation to support your content delivery and then every time you create new content, if it's something that can be tweaked or edited and made evergreen, added to your evergreen folder, and now you've got even more stuff. And that repetition, don't worry about that you're sending some of the same messages over and over again. Just Do It has been a Nike ad campaign for decades because it works, because people now associate it with Nike. So they can associate hearing about all the impact that you've had, the mission that you have, the stories that you have. Hearing that over and over again is actually helpful to your brand loyalty, and for them to feel connected with you. So we wouldn't be Progressive Multiplier if we didn't try to give you at least some type of like a thing to do between now for the next 60 days or moving forward, a little bit of a tangible plan. So I talked about a welcome series, and there's a little bit about that here. Again, retention is going to be better than acquisition any day of the week. So what can we do to build these relationships? Again, broken record time. Thank them, welcome them, share your impact, answer the questions, ask them to participate. Make sure you're following up. If folks are reaching out to you, make sure you're following up. And especially if people have shared their communication preference. So if somebody's like, I'm a text person, don't email me, make sure that you have a way to note that and to follow their wishes. They're an email person and they don't want text, but you have their cell phone number because you have their cell phone number. Just note they don't want mass text, stuff like that. And then also you want to make sure to be able to note like who is active and who is not. And active is whatever you deem as active. So typically active means they have interacted, they've clicked on something in a text, in an email, and social media, or some way that you can track it in the last X number of months. It might be 2 months, it might be 4 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. It's important to be able to know who is active and who's inactive, especially if you have a CRM where you're paying by the pound, meaning that the number of people on your list affects the amount of money that you pay every month for the CRM. Because if that's the case, knowing who's inactive gives you a different strategy to reduce your cost. You can move a lot of folks off list not to like throw them away, but you can move them off list and only put them back in at strategic moments instead. So 60-day plan. So the first thing that we were going to be to plan ahead, we need to like gather all of our messaging, figure out, like I said previously, what our content calendar is going to look like. We need to set a timeline, and then we need to try to create automations as much as we can. Right? So this is like like the inventory might be putting together that evergreen content. It might be I'm going to look at Project 2025, find all the places that talk about our issue area and figure out what our responses are and start drafting some responses so that, stay ready scenario for when it does get deployed. But, start pulling your stuff together. So here's just a really simple cadence that you can do. So this is very much like a welcome series, but this would be a 60-day process. So you'd welcome to the family, mission intro, give them a nice, and if you're doing this by email, these are short messages, no more than 400 words. If your messages are longer than 400 words, you need to work on brevity, or you've got a great opportunity to cut the stuff in half and be like, email 1 on Tuesday, email 2 on Friday. You don't have to always put everything in one email. So welcome to the family. Couple days later, you want to ask them to do something, take some type of an action. A few days after that, you want to share some type of a story. Several days after that, ask them to donate again. So if they are on your list because they made a donation, this would be a great opportunity to turn them into a monthly donor. If this is for people who just joined our list and they're not donors, this would be an opportunity to ask them for a first-time donation. So if if in this sort of like onboarding system, let's say these are folks who signed up on your website. I would do this first 2 weeks where they get these messages first and then they move into your actual list. You don't have to do it that way, but this is just sort of like how this is lined up. So these 4 messages would go first. After they got that ask, they would move into our regular email cadence of all the other emails that they get. But with a special 25-day, have them do some type of email or a survey or petition. 35 days out, another special message that's about a storytelling. 45 days out, make another donation. We know that if you can get 2 donations from someone within 90 days, they're gonna stay. Which is again why monthly giving is so important. And then at the 60-day mark, you should be sharing your impact again. This type of messaging cadence, if you were to implement this with all of the people that you've corralled during the election cycle, you would have a much higher likelihood of holding on to those constituents. And then you also need a process of like, if you need to cut some bait, to thin the list, there's a 2-step process that you can do. Like if people aren't clicking after the 60-day period, you can move them flag them, tag them, move them into an area where they don't get as many emails. And then after a year, you can move them off list where you only maybe bring them in twice a year to solicit them or to invite them to re-engage. But you take them off list so your CRM becomes cheaper and more manageable for you. And that's what we got. So I'd love to have some questions, but I do have one more thing to say. We have this fundraising workshop that's in our Fundraising Friday YouTube channel that was on the Nonprofit Industrial Complex. And why I want to point to that is because there's something that I think that gets missed in the conversations about the Nonprofit Industrial Complex, which is that philanthropy was started 2,500 years ago by my people, the Greek people. And we think that it comes from the story of Prometheus, whose great sin by Zeus was that he did the sin of giving humanity hope and fire. And I think in these moments where we're really struggling with the election results and we're scared about what's going on, being in the philanthropic space, I do lean in on this sort of like moment of inception of our ecosystems, and that we are here to give people hope and to give them our fire, to give them the tools that they need and that we need to create beloved community and to make the wins that we need to make so that we don't get trampled on by the Zeuses of the world. So that's my sort of parting moment for you, that if you start to feel despondent in these moments, just remember to share your hope and to share your fire, and you will feel much more supported in this time. And I really do thank you so much for your time and your participation. And I will stay on for a few more minutes if people have questions. I'd love to be able to answer any questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Polly.
And don't forget to fill out the survey.
All right. Thanks, Janet.